Welcome to the final session of the 2013 Tizen Developer Conference, the Dev Lab. So, how's everybody feeling? We have a good week? Yeah? That's awesome. I'm glad to hear you all say that because really, I've been to every Tizen event that we've had since we started this, and this is hands down the best that I've been to. In terms of the people who are here, the sessions that are being presented, the sponsors that we've got, this has just been the best so far. And never have I run more as early in the morning, slept less, or smashed so many pairs of glasses. I got so excited today, I crushed my glasses and it's a miracle they're on my face. Anyways, this is the Dev Lab, and we're going to go through a couple of things today. The goal is to introduce you to the native API, introduce you to the web API, and then take you through how to actually create some code and get it deployed on a Tizen device. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, this is actually a two-part session. We're going to start off in here. We're going to take a short break, and then move to a hackathon, which is happening in the Hacker Lounge. You can find that downstairs if you follow the signs out of the lobby. Before we get started, though, I'd like to give you a few more details on the Tizen App Challenge. Now, you've all heard that this was announced during the keynote, TSG keynote, a few days ago, and I wanted to give you some specifics on it, what you can win, how to do it, when it's open, and those sorts of things. So what you can win, this is the most important part. You can see we've got some pretty impressive prizes here. If you're developing a game, grand prize, you could win up to $200,000. If you're developing in one of the non-game categories, up to $120,000. And for the top 10 HTML5 applications, there's an additional $50,000 available. So we really, we want to see some great apps coming into the Tizen store. We want to see some great apps submitted to this contest. And we really want to see some HTML5. So, again, this is the contest. So how do you enter? This is another big question. It's actually a two-stage process. Stage one, submit your app to the Tizen store. Seller.tizenstore.com is where you go for that. Stage two is to actually enter the Tizen App Challenge. And any apps that have been submitted to the Tizen store since it opened, really, just recently, through the end of the contest period, can be eligible for the Tizen App Challenge. So even if you submit before the App Challenge begins on June 3rd. There's a lot more info, Tizen App Challenge. Now, I did mention it does open up June 3rd, but there is a form on there right now. Please go, please register. Let us know the sorts of things that you're interested in developing and submitting, and we'll keep you posted and make sure you don't miss any of the dates that are coming up, and we'll make sure that you know about additional hackathons and portathons and other events like that. So with that, again, Tizen App Challenge. The best thing to do would be take what you create today, get that into the Tizen store, then when things open up on June 3rd, get it into the challenge. So with that, I don't want to stand up here for too long, so I'd like to introduce Had, who's going to come and talk a little bit about some of the Tizen APIs, and he is going to be the first session. Here he comes.
All righty. So my name is Had Greeley. I am a technical evangelist with Samsung. And today I'm going to run through, and this is going to go kind of quick because I want to actually go through these slides and get us into an actual code session. So I'm just going to jump right in. As mentioned, I'm going to talk and give you a quick overview of the native development environment and actually show the beginnings of creating a typical app. And so we'll actually walk you through how to build a simple application to get you started with this. So first of all, Tizen SDK overview. How many people, I don't know, saw like sessions on this already? Are there people that aren't familiar with Eclipse? I'm going to assume, I think everyone here is pretty mature developer in mobile probably to some extent, but I do want to kind of run through quickly just so you can follow along with the coding session in a minute here. So Tizen was built with the SDK, comes with an IDE. You almost certainly recognize this if you've certainly if you've worked with Android or lots of other development environments. You'll recognize the sort of typical Eclipse layout here. A couple of things I wanted to point out that are unique to Tizen here. One, we have the Connection Explorer. So this is where you're going to be able to see when you've hooked up a device, and you can actually go through and look at the file system. I get kind of a kick out of the fact that if you're used to Linux file systems, it'll be blindingly obvious immediately that this is a Linux platform underneath. And a couple other extras that we have are the event injector. So this is really a nice extra kind of tool that you don't have in some of the other platforms, where you can actually simulate all sorts of events, and I won't go into the whole breadth of them, but you have things, you know, from typical stuff that you'd expect all the way through, you know, NFC and a bunch of other things supported. And there's also a little code snippet bit. So that just helps facilitate just a few standard things, particularly around doing exception handling and logging and some simple stuff like that that makes life easy to cut in there. So not surprisingly, of course, I think this comes with a device emulator. So I had shown you the Connection Explorer earlier, and this is just kind of a blown up view of that to show you a little bit of what that looks like. And in particular, what I wanted to highlight is how you actually get to the emulator manager. So I'm trying to get into sort of practical bits and pieces here of how you actually use this. So, you know, certain things can feel a little bit hidden. So this is where you're going to go to bring up the emulator manager. And the emulator manager is, of course, where you're going to set up your virtual devices to use for your testing. And it's really straightforward here. You can just go in, you know, create a new emulator. There's a few parameters that you'll want to set. It's things like memory size, the actual display density, things that, of course, you'd expect in something where you're supporting, you know, different sized devices. In terms of the Project Explorer, these are just to show kind of the layout of some of the things that you'd expect to see when you create a project. So you can see, as you'd expect, the source and header files are in their own subdirectories. So source, you know, the actual CPP files in one, and the header files in this include directory. There's some other things. It's important, this binaries thing, that the reason I like to point this one out is because this will tell you whether your compilation worked or not. If you don't have your binaries directory that gets populated after you build your app, then something's going wrong. Resources, typical thing where you're going to have images, audio, but it's also where you're going to have your UI layout files. And the UI layouts are XML files. Again, if you're used to Android, you'll be familiar with that style of doing the declarative layout. Libraries, so you can actually have, I mean, again, its underlying system is actually Linux, so the ability to have actually shared object libraries can be useful. Your data directory, so this is basically something that's where your application, it's the portion of the file system that's kind of set aside for your application to be saving its persistent data. And actually inside of there, you can find an area with, actually it's not inside of there, but another key one to point out is a shared area where you can actually have data that's shared and accessible between applications. Okay, so that was a really, really zippy bit just to show you some of the highlights. And kind of continuing on, I just wanted to show this to kind of highlight the UI paradigm so that you can kind of follow along with what I'm doing. And the main thing that I want to get across here is that the basic structure of the typical UI. So one of the cool things about Tizen is it's built in a way that supports a lot of these sort of standard paradigms for mobile in a way that makes it really easy to put an app together. And you can actually build an app. A lot of it, you don't even have to really do that much coding. A lot of the parameters and things you can actually just set as properties. And then I'll show how there's other pieces where it's kind of auto-filled in and stuff. So you don't have to, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of what's happening and where you need to do things. But the basic UI elements that are standard here is you have your underlying frame. Under that, typically you don't have to have forms, but most applications you would actually use the form as kind of the next level container, and of course within that you would put your typical controls. And then here are some examples where we're calling out some of the things that are really standard, again, in kind of a mobile environment. So like the indicator bar that can be essentially put in place for you. It's not something that you have to actually build yourself. And some things like some of the navigation elements that show up in the footer and stuff that are actually just pretty much put in place for you. So with those forms, of course, the next question is, how do I actually do my navigation from form to form? And again, they've actually built a class that supports the basic paradigm within Tizen with this flow of basically moving backward and forward between, so they're calling them scenes. And we'll actually, what we're going to do in the sample application is just throw up something and show how easy it is to build something with a couple different scenes in it. And that's actually going to be using this native UI builder. And so this is actually a really nice. How many people, when you hear the WYSIWYG development tool, think I'm going to, like, you know, lay out a couple of things and then have to go code everything by hand? That's often what I think when I see this stuff. But this is actually really cool, so I'll have a chance to walk through this piece. So essentially, you're going to do, you know, visual design of your stuff, and it's going to generate, like I said, one of these XML layout files, and all the wiring is going to basically be put in place for you. And actually, they've kind of gone beyond just the WYSIWYG layout of your forms to this workflow designer. So this is a really cool piece that I haven't really seen. I mean, I've seen in some other environments, but not in something like this, where you can actually just visually lay out the flow of your application and set it up. And so I'm going to show how, and again, this is something we'll walk through in the demo, but just to help you get kind of oriented. The first thing is this is kind of the panel where you can create, one way that you can create new scenes in here or new forms. Another panel where you can set these properties. So remember I mentioned that a lot of this stuff you can actually handle simply by setting properties on things. I don't have to deal with code. I'll show you some animation stuff that's really neat. You don't have to worry about coding it. It's all just right there for you. So then once you set up a couple of those things, you're going to go over here. These are where you're going to select your tools to actually do the linking up. And then the final bit is actually where you're literally just dragging between these elements to indicate the flow of your application. And then the last bit that I'll call out here is adding an event handler. So it's like, of course, the wiring is all great, but you need to actually get in there and do a little bit of code to handle some of this. And again, this is something where it's basically, a lot of it is going to be done really simply for you. So the nice thing is that you can go in, select in the properties for an event handler, And it's, as soon as you choose this and give an action ID, it's going to actually just going to drop the boilerplate code in for you. And all the wiring and stuff is, you'll see how easily it's handled. So that was really quick. And again, just to kind of orient, this is kind of following along with the steps that I'll take in showing the application as I build it. So the first thing is, just creating a new project, and we're going to be creating a native project. And in this particular case, we want to use the scene manager, so we're going to be selecting the scene manager template. This is talking about the manifest file. So again, similar to a lot of standard models these days, where you have a file that's XML declaration of a lot of properties for your application. The one key thing about this is that some of the APIs are protected, and so you may not be able to use them unless you explicitly declare the fact that you're using them. So I just wanted to call that out, that needs to be done in the XML, in the manifest file. And then we build the project, and away we go. So having said that, I'm going to switch out of my demo here. So actually, I don't want to go to the device yet. We'll go to that in a minute. So you can see I've got all my stuff set up here. So one of the first things I'm going to call out actually is, and this is something that you'll want to set up sort of just right away. And I'm, of course, looking at the Mac version. And yes, it's OK that I use a Mac. Ooh, I said it's OK. I didn't say you had to agree with it. So you want to set up a profile. And in particular, you're going to want to generate a signing certificate to be able to sign your application. So this is basically is required. I think with the earlier versions of the SDK, if anyone was playing with some of the earlier ones, you didn't actually have to have the signing certificate. At this point, it's not going to build for you unless you have one. So this is fairly straightforward. It gives you instructions on what you need to do. And the key thing here is that you actually need to go in the command line and run the certificate generator script. So that's, I don't know if you're used to building certificates or not, but there's just a bunch of sort of standard information. I mean, you can kind of decide what you want to put in here and so on. I won't run through all of that. One thing, though, is that you can see here, one tiny trick is that you actually want to, it's going to seem like it's offering to name it with a .p12 extension on it, and it actually doesn't do that automatically, so you want to make sure and add that to your file name, because otherwise when you go back and look for it, it won't let you get at it. And then you just want to remember where you generated this. And then you can go back in the profiles, and as you can see here that I've got the certificate path, and then of course the certificate, since this is critical to identifying the application as yours, of course it's going to be password protected. So when you choose your password wisely and remember it. Okay, so that's one of the key things to remember in getting started that may be slightly confusing if you don't set it up right away. Okay, so having had that set up, let's go ahead and dive into creating the application here. So actually, I don't want to switch yet. I was just turning it on. I'll have it ready in a second here. Okay, so I've actually got, one thing to notice is I've actually got Eclipse open in the native development view. So you can see here I could switch to the web view, and it would correspondingly change what's available over here in my wizard. So when I'm in the web, in the native view, it gives me, top thing is a Tizen native project, so I can just go and select that. Here, very straightforward. Empty application is something where if you're doing gaming or something and you don't want to worry about the UI controls and all this stuff, and you just want to use the frame directly, you might start with an empty project. But most of the other stuff, when you have the UI navigation, you're going to want to start with a form-based application. And again, here, you've got the two possibilities of using the scene manager or without the scene manager. So like I said, make this dead simple, we'll set up one using the scene manager. And I cannot type when, I don't know, you ever have that problem where somebody's looking over your shoulder and suddenly you can't type at all? Okay, so bang, that was really exciting, right? What happened? That happened. But what's cool is that happened is actually a lot of stuff. So in the source, we have a whole bunch of boilerplate code. I'm not going to walk through it all. And actually, when we get to debugging, which hopefully we'll have time for, I'm not quite sure why the clock is showing me 87 minutes, because I don't think I have 87 minutes. But we'll see kind of some of the layout of this. But I mean, what's nice about this is you've got the whole boilerplate stuff for your code here. You can go in and explore. I mean, I could just compile this right now and run it, and I've got my Hello World app. I want to do a little bit more than that, so we'll go a bit past that. So this is where it gets snazzy. Go in here, and I wonder why I'm looking at the wrong thing. That's because my screen is so extended. So now I can just right-click. I can go in and pop up the native UI builder. So you can see it's already filled in a bunch of stuff. So this is giving me a view of the one form that I have that was auto-built for me just by creating the project. Let me see if I can shrink it down a bit so you can actually see the full thing. So you can see we've got a bunch of the standard, the header bit, the kind of hello Tizen, and it's already populated with this nice little button here. But then what's interesting is over on the right, we have this workflow, this interesting thing. It's like, what's the workflow bit? So I go over and click on that, and now this pops up the new tab that's actually showing this visual workflow piece. And so you can see I have already the flow from application start to that first form, and now I can start adding new stuff. So here there's a couple ways I can do this. Some people would argue that you should only allow users one way, but heck. So I'm just basically right-clicking on here and going to go ahead and ask to get a new form. And you'll see how easy it is to set up our second one here. So I'm just giving it a name, clicking a screenlet resolution. You see it automatically puts in this path here that's you'll see is under the resource folder that you'll see in the Project Explorer. And that's it, bang. Go from that, and then of course I can mess with the class name if I want, and it's going to auto-populate all the stuff that I need for my class. And having done that, you'll see that it shows up over on the side here. So now I'm going to select that, and you'll see when I select it, I get some properties down here that show up. And I'm just going to drag it over and plop it in here. And now I have my second form more or less ready to go. So then, To connect this up, I just hop over here, pick the connection option, and then I can go to something that's got basically the callback from the button here. And I can just drag a connection over from one to the other, and wow, that's not the best layout. And poof, it's gone and auto-populated. So we saw the on action performed, so your action callback, and it went ahead and filled in this navigation piece right here to go. You can see it had actually already pre-populated something in here for dealing with this button click where it was just going to say, you know, hey, you've clicked me. But now it's added in for us automatically this navigation piece. And similarly, I can go back in. Whoops. Got to select the right thing. Oh, I need to add a button for this. I think I'm actually... Oh no, I actually do have some time, so, okay. Oops. So actually, as long as we've got some time, let's go back and add a button. So you can see that it was really easy. I just wanted to fill out this thing, so I double click on it, and it goes ahead and brings up another tab that's for the second form. I kind of wish it wouldn't magnify it quite so much, but let's drop that down and go ahead, and you can see now over on the left here we have all of these UI elements that are pre-done and easy to use, set up for you. I'm just going to go into Common Controls, grab a button, drag it over. I'll drop it here. And here's an example where you see the button selected, and I have all these button properties off on the side. And so to fill in the button text, instead of actually having to do any coding, all I have to do is come over here in the properties, and I'm going to have this actually navigate back and when I'm done with it. So I'm just going to have it say I'm done. So there I have my button, but now of course I need to actually have the button action do something. So I'm going to right click on that, and up comes the menu, and there's the add event handler. And here the main one for the navigation that you might want to use is this action event listener. So when we go back to the code, I'll show you how we had the action event listener on the other form as well. And then you just pick some action ID for this, and you're done, and it's going to pop you straight back to show you what just happened. And basically what just happened, that's strange. Oh, sorry, it's because I forgot to do some of the things. Let's set some other properties in here. So with my workflow, now that I have that button there and it's got the action performed, I can actually go ahead and drag this. So let's just say I simply want to go from one form to another form and then back. So you can see once I do that, visually make that connection, it goes back, and you saw before that this boilerplate callback was empty, and now it's gone in and it's put in the actual navigation piece. But you'll notice here I've actually got again a call to go forward, but what I really wanted was to navigate back so that I can go back and forth between the tabs. So that's actually easy. And so here what I'm going to do, as I said a lot, again, just emphasizing over and over again how easy it is to do this stuff and do it just setting properties. So I go back, I can select on my navigation indicator, and that brings up a set of properties over here. And one of those properties being the animation. So let's see what the depth in looks like. And you'll see we actually have here is the navigation direction. This one's listed as forward, which is what I want to go from my main scene to my second one. I'll go forward. Then I'll go pick on this other one and set up a navigation here as well. Let's do depth out so it kind of matches. In this case, I wanted to actually do a backward navigation. So with those simple steps, I've actually set up everything I need for this app framework that's then something, you could start with this and expand from there. So I'll go in and hit the wrong key. Save everything up. Go back to the builder. So now I've got, actually again, just to highlight, so that the on action performed, which you saw kind of corresponded to what it was showing me in the wizard, has been populated. And now we see that it's gone to this go backward call. So, of course, that has to do with your application and what it's kind of keeping on this scene stack. And you notice actually that like none of the navigation stuff is in here. I don't even have to be bothered by looking at the navigation code. It's just handled for me automatically. So with all of that stuff in place, we can go ahead and build a project. You get your log down here. I really encourage people to like look at what's happening down here and understand. There's a bunch of reasons for it. It can help you understand, what the tools are that are being used. If you want to go do everything by hand, you can do everything by hand. The other thing, there was one thing that surprised me is that my Mac didn't come with Make installed, and the first time, or this one anyway, when I tried to build something and it's like nothing happened and I wasn't sure why, and it turns out that I had to go install some extra tools. And then you'll see once it's actually completed with no problems in this case, and you'll see that this binaries folder is shown up now. And you can go poke around and see that there's the Hello World executable in there. So now that I've got that built, I can go ahead and fire it off. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it as a Tizen native application. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and run it with the debugging because I want to show one quick thing with that. So actually, if we could bring up that briefly. So we'll see in a second here that it's doing all the stuff to compile it, and then it'll actually, to finish, it'll go ahead and push to the device. So again, all of that stuff is in your console log. So if you ever like want to do stuff in the command line, like there's the actual, I don't really want to go into the debug perspective. Stop asking me. So as we see here, I don't know if you saw the transition, but there's a Hello World app that just showed up. And then actually before I kind of continue with that, if we could switch back to the regular screen. When I went to ran it in debug mode, it actually stopped at your main entry point. So your main entry point is this OSP main. And this is a bunch of boilerplate. You can see where it's setting up like argument lists and stuff. I thought that would get out of the way. And then your key piece here is where it's firing off your real application with this create instance method. So just to give you an idea of the flow through your application in case you really want to get into the details of it. Okay, so we can switch back to the device. And I'll switch to that. Okay, so it had halted for to start debugging. So I just told it to continue. I haven't set any breakpoints or anything. And there I've got my hello Tizen, and I've got my button. And then sure enough, if I hit my button, it goes off to the next scene. I've got my I'm done there, hit that, and it navigates me back to the original scene. So I really like that it's just very straightforward to set all of this stuff up. And I always tell people, at least me with my kind of background with things, I like to get some framework set up that I can at least understand and start playing with, something that's working, so that once you have something running, right, it's always 100 times easier from that point to actually start adding new stuff and making it really cool. So that was the simple hello world thing. And actually now if we can switch back to the builder, what I'm going to show you, whoops. Another nice thing that comes along with this is the huge array of sample code that we have. So I haven't really gotten into the APIs. Frankly, there's some really interesting, unusual ones in here. So I'm going to highlight one of them here. So there's a lot of standard stuff that you'd expect in here. I mean, you can see this big list of sample applications that cover all sorts of aspects of the thing. So, we could go play with the UI controls and stuff like that. But actually, one of the really neat ones that I want to show you is this face recognizer app. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new application using that. And of course, it popped up over here in the project area. And so this is actually pretty amazing. I mean, you look at how little there is in terms of the code here. And again, a lot of this is basically sort of boilerplate. The one thing I'm going to do is go and look for the camera, because if I run this the way it is, so there, Control H, standard Eclipse thing, it pops up. I search for camera piece. It's all seems easy when you sit down and write this stuff up, and then you try and make it visible on a big screen, and it all goes to let's see. No, it's not there. And I'm forgetting which file this is in. Well, I don't want to take up too much time with that, but the idea is basically you got a front and back camera. So I'll see if I can just demo this with the back camera. So I'll go ahead and build it. And again, I mean, if you're familiar with GCC tools and stuff, you'll see kind of a lot of the stuff you'd expect showing up here in terms of the commands that it's running. Okay, so that built fine. And now if I can switch it over, I'll run this. Uh, so wait, did I pull up the wrong application? That's why I'm not finding what I'm looking for, is because I think I picked the wrong thing. Sorry, not face tracker. I wanted the face tracker piece. See, too many nifty things in here to play with. So actually, we can switch back to the other piece. So face tracker is the one that I actually wanted to show, and that's why I wasn't finding the camera the way I should have. Okay, so I can search and find this constructor for the camera. I'm going to change this to the front-facing camera. And of course, you have the kinds of autocomplete stuff that you're used to in Eclipse. Save that guy. So really, I mean, this will be fun to look at, but the main thing that I'm getting at is, of course, the amount of support that you have in building for Tizen with all of this built-in stuff. I haven't had a chance to go through anywhere near that whole list of example applications that you have. So let's run this guy. So I want to show this just because, we've really done more than build just a sort of standard platform here, but there's a lot of capabilities that go kind of above and beyond what you might expect in other applications. Okay, can we switch over? Okay, so there we got the face tracker. Right now it's staring back up at the Elmo. Fortunately, it doesn't think that Elmo has a face. Let's see if I can get it to decide that I have a face in a way that this is going to look goofy, but so look at that. Is that cool or what? All right, so that was a huge run through, and I think I'm just about on time here to end. Didn't get into the debugging, but if you're used to this environment, it's just your standard breakpoints, able to examine values and stuff like that. But I think it's really nice, especially if you're not so used to C++ or something, that this does so much for you that you don't really have to be that concerned about, as concerned about learning the environment. It's like, you can figure out a lot just by seeing what it builds for you, and then the API set is just so powerful that you'll be able to do all sorts of cool stuff. Okay, so I don't know if we were set to actually have questions or not. I guess, are we? So I guess I have a couple minutes for questions. QT, supporting QT. So obviously somebody who knows some of the background of, I'm not actually aware of any plans. Like I always say that, they try to keep engineers as ignorant as possible because otherwise we tell people things we're not supposed to. So I don't actually know of any plans to support it. I mean, it's open platform. I think this is one of the cool things is in some ways Tizen is going to be what people make it, right? So, and you know, the Qt stuff that was there for MeeGo and you know, that whole background is I wouldn't be surprised if somebody, you know, just up and does it, so. Any other questions? That's a long way back there. Way over there.
How do you handle cross-compiling for different architectures?
Compiling for different architectures, so the question was how do you handle compiling for different architectures? So you have your build configurations. And I think this one's actually just set up for the x86 binary, so I can't kind of walk through the whole thing, but you'll have support in the toolkit for basically, you know, the two primary things. Obviously, Intel's a huge backer, and so you know, having the tool sets that support Intel processors is going to be critical. But also, you know, ARM, since it's so popular, it's going to be in there. Okay. And of course, we'll be around for the rest of the dev lab, so you know, come and grab. We've got actually several people that are going to be here, I think, supporting for a while. So I'd love to talk to you more about what we've got here, but then I'm going to pass it over for the web part. Have fun.
That was really interesting. You know, a lot of the conference has been all about how exciting the web development environment is in HTML5, and kind of shifting gears and showing the rich tools and availability of the native, I think is really, it's exciting to see the complement to the web stuff. I had two comments to make. About Qt, I did see a link of another group that had already got a Qt for Tizen, so if you Google it, you'll probably find that. And as far as, just like Hod mentioned, is that it's an open platform, so if someone creates a platform and adds that capability, they can still have a Tizen platform as long as they satisfy the other requirements that are part of the compliance program. And then the architecture also, he answered well. The nice thing about the SDK is it can support different tool chains. And currently the emulator is an x86-based emulator, so when you deploy to the emulator, it automatically builds the x86 binary, and when you deploy to the device, it will build the ARM binary. So you can add additional tool chains in the infrastructure. It supports that. You don't have to worry about that with the current setup that we have. My name is Bob Spencer. I work at Intel in the Open Source Technology Center and have been working on Tizen since the beginning, and really excited to see the growth and the things that are happening and all of the development, and especially the tools are getting better and better. Lots of really exciting things, UI builders and scene managers and all of these other things that are pouring into the SDK toolset. So it's becoming a very easy way to create your applications. I went to a couple of sessions, different sessions that talked about using your favorite tools for creating web applications, and we certainly don't discourage that, and we hope that you come to Tizen with whatever tools that you like to use, but we also have an ambitious goal to make great tools that you'll love so much that we hope that you use the Tizen SDK. We want to make it as easy as it can be for you to get your web applications built and published. We have I was just going to make a note. We have a USB pen drive that you'll get after this session. It has the SDK on it. So when you're traveling home, if you're heading onto the train or bus, you can install the SDK. And this time last year, we only had support for a fairly limited number of platforms, but in that time, we've added quite a bit. So we now, as demonstrated, we have Mac support, which is exciting, and Windows support for XP and 7 and 64-bit and 32-bit also. And one of the things that enables that to have happened is the acceleration of the emulator. And so I just wanted to make a note, when you install on Windows or Mac, ensure that you have the Hardware Acceleration Execution Manager installed. It should install. Sometimes on the Mac it doesn't, so just check that you have that. It will make your experience with the emulator 10 times better, at least. It won't, when you're using the emulator, it won't cause you extreme stress like it used to when you were waiting and waiting and waiting. Okay, I am going to talk quickly about some of the things that weren't covered as much in some of the other sessions. We put the Dev Lab at the end of the conference, so you've heard some fairly deep dive technical discussions in different topics, and this is an overview. And I'll go over quickly things that have been said and point out a few things I've found. When you start to prepare the presentation, you find a whole bunch of little issues, and I'll try to highlight the things that I discovered as I was putting together my presentation that will help you get over a few hurdles when you're creating your web application. We'll also walk through really quickly, similar to what Hod did for native, creating a web application, deploying it. I'll deploy it to the emulator on my system, quickly showing you how to set up the debug environment, and how to package it and get it ready for deployment to the store, and make it so that you'll know everything that you need to so that you can win the first prize in our contest and retire. So, and then depending on the time, I'll introduce the Tizen device APIs, the APIs that allow you to get to the sensors and hardware information on the system. I'll go over that quickly. That's a little bit dry, so I was putting it at the end, and hopefully we run out of time before we get there. But if not, we'll go through that quickly. So we've been waving our hands in an excited fashion, talking about how awesome the web framework is for Tizen. We are excited about it. We think that it's world-class, and as I had mentioned in a few of the keynotes, the benchmarks for compatibility are very high. We want to make sure that we've been very involved with the standards group, working with W3C, looking at the progress of HTML5, embracing it, trying to enhance it and extend it, and find a good balance between getting the cutting edge API and features with stability. And that's another reason when we talk about the Tizen device APIs as a complement to the things that we feel are maybe not quite ready in HTML5 yet. Performance has been a big focus, both in the SDK and on the device. Responsiveness, acceleration, making things feel really smooth. The web framework also includes a rich set of web UI widgets based on jQuery Mobile, so everything you need to lists and buttons and drop-downs and things, so that if you use those widgets, we can have a nice, consistent look and feel across applications that are designed that way, if it's not just a fully graphics game or something like that. The main components, WebView based on WebKit and EFL, the JavaScript core, the web core backend implementation of HTML5 APIs, and then the WebKit API. The web runtime is based on WebKit, built with EFL, the Enlightenment Foundation libraries, and supports the standard W3C package. It also supports applications that are hosted on a server, so you would install your WGT package locally, but the information would point to the server so your application can be hosted. The standard package management features to install, uninstall, and update. And then we have these two primary categories of APIs, the HTML5 W3C API, which is what you would have outside of Tizen. If you're porting any application, would be based on that. And then an enhancement to that to enable the applications to get information from the system that we call the device API. We won't go through every line here, but this is, if you go online and also in the offline help, you can get all of the details about which specific APIs and features are supported in HTML5, and there's links to the definitions of these things in the outside of Tizen, so you can get all the information about exactly what is supported. The features, and again, we're continually looking at bringing in the best and especially the mature and features from the HTML5 progress, and participating there and contributing the things that we enhance back upstream. So Hod gave an introduction of the IDE. I won't go into great detail there. We'll use it in a second, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, and when you use it, you'll become familiar quickly. I'd like to walk through these steps quickly, create an application, and talk about the features there, look at the components of your application when it's built, how to package it, and a couple hurdles to get over. And I'll come back and make sure I've covered this. So I'll just switch over to my Eclipse environment. So when you come to your project, I might do that because I'm navigating from this screen. Let me find my cursor. Okay. So in addition to all of the great native samples, there's a lot of good material in the web samples, and I hope you'll look through them. They have a number of different templates that you can use to get started. If you're bringing your application over from another environment, you can just start with the basic, and that will fill out the elements that you need for the minimal application. And then you can just replace everything else with your application, call into your main HTML file, and your application should work. And you can also, there's some information on the website that talks about how to load your web application inside the IDE. There's just two main files that you need. So it's Eclipse-based, so bringing your application from another tool, you'll need to create a .project file, and you'll want the Tizen config.xml file for all the permissions and access and features that you'll need for a Tizen application. So those are described on the website. If you look for loading your web application, it has a couple of those template files you can just put into your project, and it makes it very easy. Then you can have your project loaded in the Eclipse IDE. There is a whole bunch of web app samples that can give you a head start. If you're doing something kind of like one of the samples, you can look at how they did it. The Compass listens for GPS information, and so things like that. I recommend looking through the samples and seeing if you can get a head start there if you're starting from scratch. And then one thing that I have found nice and I'd like to recommend is the user templates, especially if you're working with a group that's creating multiple apps that work together, which is often the case if you're a company and you have 3 or 4 different applications you're targeting. You want them to have similar features. You can create user templates, and then everybody can start out with, you know, the types of things that you want everybody to have the same as. So you can start with the same UI elements and the navigation and everything for your company, for your project, or even for yourself. So I created my own template, and that's what I always start with, and it helps me solve all the little things that I always do every single time. Okay, so here I've created a basic project, and you can see what the contents of the project are. And just to show on the file system, so my workspace is workspace-tdc, and here I've got a project called TDC Bob, and so there's not a lot of magic that goes on there. What you see in that file list is this same directory. What you'll find here is there's also this project file that allows Eclipse to know which builders to use to build your web app. It can be a little bit frustrating when you bring your web application from somewhere else in and it's not building your package, and it doesn't give you a lot of information about why, but the reason is because you haven't associated the correct web app builders with your project. So it's building nothing and saying all is well. So you want to make sure that you've got a .project file configured with this information that talks about the different builders to actually create a Tizen web application package. Things are familiar here. So we've got our primary file can be any name and the primary icon for your application. And then I wanted to look inside the config XML. So by default, it was open already, but it opens in this graphical interface, and at the bottom you have the features that are important for Tizen. I'll just mention a couple. You can read about them. I think I might even have that also open here. No, they're also online. It talks about each of the things. I recommend that you understand what each of those tabs means. Two things that are interesting. Features are things that your application requires from the device that you're targeting. So if you are a compass, you might require that a GPS be present. So you need to put into the features that it must have support for that sensor, for a GPS. And this is used when your application is in the store to filter which devices would be able to see your application, so that we don't send a compass application to a device without a GPS and it just doesn't work, and then there's a bad experience. The next one that is important to understand is the privileges. So in the device APIs, getting access to hardware on the system requires specific privileges, and we want the user to be able to grant those privileges when they install that application. If you don't put the privilege in your application when you're trying to use those APIs, they'll be failing. So you need to make sure that you put the privilege of the things you want, and then when your application gets downloaded, the consumer will get the option to say, can this application access these features? Okay, the final output is, so all of those things are in text in source, so you can also just edit the text once you're an expert and just put all of your things there if that's what you prefer. So when you create a project, if by chance it crashes, it never happens when you're practicing, but just be glad it doesn't happen in front of a lot of people. You just start it back up. And then move it over. So let's try it again. I'm going to build this project. One of the things I found was it's common when I make a project, it may have multiple words to use a hyphen. And hyphen's fine for the project name, but there's an ID that gets generated automatically, and if it has a non-alphanumeric character, then you get this error. And when you go to find out what the error is, you'll open your project, you'll see there's a little red flag next to config.xml, and you'll discover by hovering over the error that the value is not facet valid with respect to pattern something something, which means you have a hyphen. So you just need to remove the hyphen and save your config XML, and then you won't get that error anymore. So just a tip. Okay. Let me make sure I covered the components. Features, privileges, non-alphanumeric characters. Oh, certificate generation, Hod touched on that. So the same thing for web apps as the native applications, they need to be signed. And it's just a one-step. When you use the SDK, you only have to do this once, and that is to generate a certificate. He showed how to get to it. If you don't have a certificate, it tells you, and it has a link to where you set it up, and it has help, and I found it to be very easy. So if you run into that, it shouldn't be a big deal, and you only have to do that once. Okay, if you're successful, you'll get a package, and that, in this very basic application, is now ready to deploy. Assuming we've debugged it and it's got all the right magic in it, it's ready to go to the store. It should be signed with our certificate and ready to be sent off. So when we're talking about the contest, we're expecting to be receiving a packaged, signed application just like that. Okay. We'll run this in a minute. I think that's all there. So let's talk about debugging. We've gone over this a little bit with the native side. You may have seen some demos, or other people have talked about it. So for web applications, there's 3 ways to debug your application within the Tizen SDK. You can use the emulator, which is the full virtual machine running the Tizen OS on your platform. You can have a device, which soon you will. I'm sure you're watching the time to see how soon you can get your device. Very fun to play with the device and to debug your application on an actual piece of hardware. And then another nice tool is the web simulator. This is just a Chrome browser-based tool that loads your web app, basically just points to the file directory and primary application. And I'll talk about some of the advantages of using that in a minute. The emulator and the device behave very similarly in the IDE. There will be, when you connect your device with the USB drive, it shows up in the connection manager. When you start your emulator, it will show up here. So I created one. But before I do that, let me just do the web simulator first. So I'll kind of go backwards up the list. So let's start with the simulator. On the USB pen drive, we have a sample game. It's a simple web app. So I'll just demonstrate that. When you go, if your application builds successfully, you should get these 2 options to run as a web app or as a web simulator application. The first one runs in the emulator or the device, and the second one will run on the simulator. The advantage of the simulator is it's very fast. And you can edit your files and just hit refresh. You don't have to continually redeploy it because it's not actually installing a WGT, as opposed to the device and the emulator, which sends the package over and installs it on the device. It also has a lot of nice simulator features, thus the name, that allow you to test out the device APIs. For example, you can tweak the battery settings to make sure your application does something correctly with battery, or if we were talking about the compass, so you can move this around and it will send accelerometer parameters into your application if your application is listening. Calls, it has a panel for simulating calls and emails and SMS messages and all the things that we support in the device APIs. So especially device API focused, if you are using those, I recommend playing with the simulator. It's also nice just doing quick UI tweaking because you can easily kind of play with the orientation, see how it would behave at different sizes, and look at close-up graphics and things in the application. With the simulator, you can also get access to the Chrome DevTools. It is running in Chrome, so you have the ability to debug, to set breakpoints in your JavaScript. Just one note is the Chrome DevTools also includes the panels that are part of the simulator. We're trying to hide those, but it still shows those. So you need to find your application's JavaScript and ignore the panels and the things that will show up in the DevTools for those. But for example, this is the JavaScript for this application, and you can set a breakpoint, and then when a sound happens in the application, you can step through your application. Okay, that is the simulator. Yes. Let's look at the second option, the emulator. So this is our very basic application. Oh, I didn't start the emulator yet. And it's already running. So I'll launch the emulator. It showed up here. I got to move it over. For the most part, the emulator will behave just like the device. So the advantage of both the device and the emulator is you have all the system services available when you're debugging your application. If it depends on another service, if it wants to play something with the music player, if it's relying on something that would be in the OS, then you'll want to use the emulator, because the simulator will only have just your application running. So the emulator is ready. Our package has been built, so we can now run our application. In the emulator. Okay. The emulator uses the same debugging mechanism. So when we deploy an application to the emulator, in debug mode, it will bring up the Chrome Dev Tools, so that if you get familiar with using them, you'll find that they have a lot of great features, and it makes it very easy to step through JavaScript code, investigate your DOM objects by moving your mouse over the elements in the page, and gives you everything that you need in order to successfully solve the problems and make great apps. And in fact, let me just so instead of running, this time I selected debug instead of just talking about it. So you've got the ability to look at the elements, and you've got your sources, and you can set breakpoints just like in the simulator. So you've got access to all those features. Okay. Let me demonstrate a little bit about let me just check here and make sure I covered everything. One thing I believe is the case still under device. The last time we got a device at the last conference, it was those big lunchbox devices, we call them, and you had to make sure you set the time. If you didn't set the time, deployment didn't work, and it was a mystery. So when you get your device, if the time is not set to an accurate time, do that first. I don't know if it's still the case, but I think it is, so I want to make sure we do that. Okay. All right. Sorry, we didn't run out of time. So I'm just going to go over a couple of examples of the device APIs, mainly to show you the pattern of how you would use them, how the callbacks are done. And I'll just touch quickly on the blue ones to give you an idea of the features that are there. There's a lot of great features. And the device API will continue to expand in the future, but we have a really great initial set. So using the application environment we have here, if we look at so this is the main file that shows up at the beginning. We've got a couple of buttons at the top. If you look at this picture, so we have 3 buttons here, and I'm just going to associate an action with them, and then we will use our application API to do something interesting. So we've got an exit link, an action link, and this home button that does nothing. And inside my JavaScript, I've associated those buttons down here with different actions. You can see here my exit link is associated with exiting, and I'm using the first API from this set. And just to demonstrate the nice features of the IDE, so when Tizen is the root object, so just typing Tizen and a dot will show you all of the available APIs that you can use. Once you get slightly familiar with where you're heading, it makes implementation of new functions and features really quick. So here we are using application. And then again, you've got all the functions that are available, and you've got help about all of the parameters and description of each of the functions. So it makes it quick. So we have get current application. It tells us that it returns an application. So then with the object that is returned, whether you assign it to a variable or just running here, again, you have access to all of the features of that object in the help, and you can call those methods and start developing quickly. Looking at the first API, the application API, it provides access to control your application, to exit the current application, as well as to call, launch other applications. It requires that you set access permission to have this in your config.xml. But for example, if you want to launch another application, you just can specify the ID of that application and it will launch. More common scenario may be that you have a service that you need to have to occur based on something that you're providing. For example, you want to have the user pick an image. So you want to use the system's file picker, and you want it to be filtered on images. So it provides you what is called app control services. I'll show one demonstration of this quickly that allows you to specify the service type you want and then a filter on that service type. So for example, if you wanted to have the file picker for images, you would use the pick service, and then you would pass in the filter of what you'd like. So let's do that quickly here. Here I've created an app control for playing a song. So there is an app control called view, which is overloaded a little bit. So you view a file if you wanted to view an image or view a video or view a song, then you would use view. And we're going to view this song that I put on the system. So first we create our object app control, and then we'll launch our app control with that app control. And then just to understand the patterns for all of the APIs, most of them have on success and on error function pointers after the main parameters. So here I've shown two. Actually, the last one's not. Let me just make that null. So we have, if we looked at the parameters for this function, it takes an ID and then a success callback and an error callback and a control data array reply callback. Well, I didn't know what the last one was, so I just put null. But on all of them, you'll have these other two function types, and if you look at how you can implement them, you can do them. You can pass null if you don't want to be notified when it succeeds or fails. You can just put them in line, or you can define them externally, depending on how big they are. So let's not say clock launched, let's say music player launched, and cross our fingers and try it. So as Hod mentioned, when you're standing in front, all of the errors are mysterious. But it says line 26. I won't torture you too long. Did I put in I put the whole thing from the help. Sorry about that. You guys knew that. I didn't. If you were my friends, you would have told me. Okay. App control. Does that look right? I know you know. And if you do this, it'll work just fine. So I'll just keep moving on. So what will happen is if I fix that bug, and I don't know where it is, but it would when you click the button, it will say action, and then it will launch your music app. On air. Yeah, it's right here. Okay. I know you guys really want this to work. Null for that. So we need 3 more functions. We need a success. There's success. There's error. And there's null. The on error is our error message up here.
I think he's missing semicolon.
Well, I can just make it null. Why don't we, it will never error. It'll always work. Oh, thanks. See, my friends are helping me out now. All right, let's try it.
Semicolon.
You don't need semicolons, right? Okay, this will be part of the lab afterwards. So you guys can solve this, and we'll give you a reward if you can do it. All right. Sorry about that. It's a simple thing. So it brings up the music player, and it plays a song. It's really exciting. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Just a few more minutes. Let me go quickly through the API features. Let's say 3 minutes, and then we'll have just a little bit of time for questions. Alarm API, as you would guess, allows you to set alarms and launch things when that alarm is triggered. So you can specify a service and an action to happen when the alarm triggers. You can list them, you can manage them. And I've put in sample code that does all of these things, should work, so that later when you get the slides on the website, if you're looking at a specific device API, please look through there. I've got all of the, even the ones that we won't touch on, I've got examples in all of them, so you can get the code to get examples. Content API allows you to discover the multimedia content on your system and filter it based on type, music, videos, images. You can also update media items. Messaging services for sending and receiving messages. SMS, email, MMS messages. You can also register to be notified when when a message arrives. You can manage the messages, update, delete them. Again, each of these specific features requires that you've registered for that permission in your configuration file. Code for examples on how to create and send an SMS message and list the messages that have come in is there. Calendar API for adding events, finding out what events are there, triggering notifications when certain calendar events happen, so your application can set calendar items and listen for certain other calendar items to happen, to be notified on a certain time or date. The Contact API for contact management, adding and fetching contact information, updating contacts, and again, examples on how to create a contact. This creates a contact and adds it to the address book. The File System API to access files on the system, just noting that the files are represented in a virtual file system and only exposes hierarchies below a specific accessible route, not the full file system, due to security permissions. So you'll have access to, for example, the multimedia files, and you'll have specific security restrictions on what your application can and can't do. Each device must support these as part of the compliance, so you can expect as an application developer to have access to these file system locations. And some example. And I think the last one in my list, the System Information API is very useful for discovering status of sensors and other information on the system. CPU load, network status, battery level and status, connectivity to a cellular network, and we have some sample on checking those properties. Ooh, sorry, one more. Notification API for managing notifications. For example, your application wants to tell the user something, so you can create a notification with an image and play a sound and have that brought to the user's attention using the notification API. You can also register to get notifications of other applications that send their notifications. Okay. There's also, before the questions, just a note, this slide deck, which will be available, also goes through all of the other APIs, Bluetooth and NFC, and it has a little bit more about the codecs supported for multimedia, call history, and some of the less common APIs. The names describe mostly what they are, but there's some good snippets in there for you guys to use if you're interested in that API. All the presentations from the conference will be on the developer site soon. I don't know how fast they can get them there, but within a day or two, they'll be out there. Okay, are there any questions?
There are microphones in the audience. Please step up to them so everyone can hear.
So the first question comment was if I would please talk about web workers. I assume. And yes, so when you have an application that does significant amount of work, you can leverage web workers. I didn't have time to put together that part of a presentation. I'm sure that demo would have gone awesome, but please look into the web workers. It's documented in the help, and they are supported. Question at the mic?
Yeah, when you're compiling a JavaScript
Yes.
code, are you compiling it to a binary, or is that feature not available yet?
It's not compiled to a binary. It's packaged in the WGT, but it's not.
Okay. I went to the sessions on how to, what was that? Hide your JavaScript source code by compiling it to binary.
So you know everything there is to know.
That's for the web runtime. That's not available yet, right? On the
I don't know much about that.
Oh.
I've seen some presentations on it. I don't know exactly how that takes place, but
okay.
I think that it's something that you can do with your application, and more support for that type of thing can be added to the tools. It does bring up a thing I wanted to mention, which was we talked about native initially, and we talked about web, and we didn't talk about hybrid applications, which I think will be fairly common, and there's multiple types of hybrid applications that are supported, whether it's starting with a native application and having a web control in your application so that you're showing a web view, but your application is native, or Tizen also supports a model where you've got two applications, a native and a web application that communicate together and are bundled together in a single project and packaged as one. So that's also documented in the help, and there's a sample there's a template for it, so you can go and to get started, just load that template up.
Is there a secured storage API for storing password and credential thing?
That's a good question. I don't know. Does someone here know that? If there's a security storage API for storing passwords. I'm not familiar with that in the device API.
Hey, I'd like to thank you for your support on HTML5. I successfully ported my HTML5 3D multiplayer game within like half an hour. It was so easy, it's pretty much just Chrome. Testing on a device was the biggest challenge. I just wanted to ask, with the great innovations that Mozilla was doing with Unreal Engine supporting ASM.js, do you plan on supporting that feature?
I don't know if it's on a roadmap, but we're definitely looking into that technology and trying to understand how we tie into what we're doing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So I've only got one slide, which is going to be a lot quicker. My name's Stuart Christie. I'm a HTML5 community manager at Intel, and I'm also the Tizen app developer community manager. And I've just got a couple of notes to go over for the hackathon that we're doing after TDC. As you can see there, we've got locations and times. It starts at 6 p.m., so you've got time to play with your phones as they're being handed out. We start in the Hacker Lounge downstairs, but there will be people outside from Be My App who will lead you downstairs. It's on the lower floor of the hotel, and there are stamps on the floor, but if you find it down there. And then on Saturday, we're going to a different place, right? We're going out to the Sandbox Suites, which is just south of Market there, from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. The actual coding is 9 a.m. to 6, and then we've got the demos, and then we've got the judging. We'll try and get it all done. Obviously, we'd like you to get something into your your competition, all right? But just to make it a bit more, basically to give you some spending money, we've got $2,000 total in prizes for the best apps tomorrow evening. That's pretty much all I've got. I'd like to bring the man up who opened the conference to close it out for us.
Thank you. Big hand for all the speakers. So just a couple of quick things. Yes?
Are you going to make the announcement that I need to stay in here and get the device?
Yes. Okay. So a couple of quick things. This is the box that you'll be getting in exchange for the piece of paper, and inside it does contain a software development platform. One quick note about this. This isn't actually a phone. So it does have Wi-Fi connectivity, but it won't connect up to the cellular network. So if you put a SIM card in and it doesn't connect up, that's actually, it's not your device malfunctioning. That's the way that it's supposed to be. These devices are being handed out now. If you have a piece of paper, please stay in here because they are coming around to get them to you. And with that, I think we can close things out here. Thank you again, everybody, for coming this year. I think it's been a fantastic conference, and we're really looking forward to the next one. Again, come back this evening, do some hacking, come back tomorrow, do some hacking. There are some short-term prizes, and, of course, by October 1st, get your apps into the App Challenge. We're looking forward to seeing them, and everybody have a safe trip home. Thanks a lot.